Sometimes when we want to find out information, we take a sample from a whole population and survey them. An example of this might be to find out how people are going to vote in an upcoming election. Rather than take every person in a population and ask them individually, a certain number of people will be taken and surveyed. This obviously is much faster and cheaper and easier, and then generalizations are formed from the samples. Now, the first thing we need to keep in mind when we're taking samples is the sample has to be chosen randomly. So therefore, if we were going to do a survey, for example, with voting, and we went to a young Liberals conference, there's a very high chance that the sample would not be representative of the population. In the same way, if we wanted to find out how much money in general students took to school, it wouldn't be a great idea to conduct the sample or choose the sample outside the canteen, because quite possibly the students at the canteen have more money. So in many cases, a lot of care is taken to make sure the sample is random, because the more random the sample, the more likely the sample is to reflect the population. So what we're possibly looking for in the population or in the sample is the number of people or the number of objects with a certain attribute. Now, the proportion of people in the population would be considered P. So the proportion with the attribute divided by the number of the population. That would be P. When we look at the sample, we call that P hat, and that's the proportion with the attribute in the sample divided by the sample size. As well as worrying about the proportions, there might also be numerical values that we consider. And the numerical values, our letter mu, is the sum of values in the population divided by the number of the population. And you'd be familiar with that as a mean that we use anyway. And the respective sample sum divided by the number, it's considered X bar. So that's the mean of the sample. And our study of samples and population begins with just that. So in summary, when you take a sample from a population, you generally do so to make things faster or cheaper or easier in some way. But you do have to be very careful that you choose the sample in a random way. Letters P and P hat refer to the proportion of the population and the proportion in the sample size respectively. And we also look at the mean, which is mu when we look at the population, and X bar when we look at the sample. If you found this or any of my other videos helpful, please subscribe to my channel or like the video. Thanks.